Welcome to Recap King. In this video, we will explain the Wrath of Vajra. This movie tells the story of a man who was trained to be a deadly fighter by Hades, a Japanese cult. Later becoming a follower of the Shaolin Temple, he is set to face imperialist Japan's latest plot through Hades. Will he be able to defeat the cult that raised him? Let's find out in the Wrath of Vajra. The Wrath of Vajra begins when a Japanese prince named Shirogane visits Sensei Amano, a prisoner who was once the founder of a death cult called the Cult of Hades. The prince asked Amano to revive the Hades sect to instill fear in people's minds because recently the situation was not conducive, where people began to doubt the power of Japan. Amano agreed, and the old man asked the prince if he would be allowed to meet someone who would help him revive the Hades sect. The scene then switches and shows a young man named Daisuke Kurashige who is practicing martial arts in a hall. Not long after, Amano came to Daisuke with the high priest. Daisuke was very surprised to see the teacher's arrival, especially when Amano ordered him to revive the Hades sect, which had been disbanded long after he was thrown into prison. Amano entrusted the task of awakening to Daisuke because he was his most talented student and was a great fighter who still maintained all the principles the cult of Hades taught him. Amano then inducts Daisuke as the new leader of the Hades sect and orders him to continue the cult of death in the Temple of Hades by starting a death game in which famous warriors are summoned from all over the world and made to fight against the warriors of Hades. Amano and Daisuke then devise a plan to bring back K-29, one of Hades' students who is also a great fighter, to the Hades temple so that Daisuke can kill him because he has joined Shaolin and is fighting the Japanese Empire. Amano and Daisuke intend to destroy people's belief that K-29 is the Vajra King. Not only that, but he also asked his daughter, Iko, who works as a reporter, to cover the revival of the Hades temple and spread the news of the revival of the cult of Hades throughout the world. Meanwhile at the Shaolin temple, it looks like K-29 or Huji is practicing self-defense using an hourglass that will measure the speed of his moves. Huji is known as the King of Vajra because in the past when he was still in the Hades sect, he could defeat all his colleagues. No one in the Hades sect could defeat him, not even Daisuke. While practicing, Huji recalled his childhood memories when he was still at the Temple of Hades, where he was forced to fight to the death against his elder brother, K-31. Unable to bear the guilt of his brother's death, he vows to take revenge against the Hades sect. After successfully escaping from the Temple of Hades many years ago, Huji then moved to the Shaolin Temple with his younger brother Qingquang and lived a life of peace. There, he was trained by a Shaolin monk. In the middle of the practice, Qingquang came to Huji and a Shaolin monk who was his teacher. The teacher said that Huji could still master the 17-second deadly moves, better known as the Wrath of Vajra, because he was still holding back his emotions. Having pure emotions meant having true feelings, and that was the only way to master the move. But to get it, Huji must have a high sense of compassion and concern for all living things on Earth. The scene then switches and shows multinational forces fighting against the Japanese Empire, being held captive on a ship that will take them to Hades' temple, located on a remote island. The troops, led by a man named Bill, are then led to the battlefield, where fighters worldwide are brought in and forced to fight the Hades fighters to the death or until they surrender and are willing to sign a contract to join the Hades sect. One fighter named Huang managed to defeat a Hades fighter, and he was entitled to advance to the next round to fight against another great fighter of Hades temple named Tetsumaku. Bill and his troops then meet the high priest who welcomes him, and one of the warriors of Hades announces a series of rules that they must obey while in the temple of Hades. On the other hand, there is a man in charge of taking care of the fighters' bodies who must be cleaned before burial. Daisuke then came to Bill, and it was revealed that Bill and his two comrades were former fighters at the Temple of Hades. Daisuke tries to persuade Bill and the others to return to Hades' temple, but they firmly refused his offer and preferred to fight to the death. On the other hand, Huji and his brother came to the head of the dying Shaolin monk. The monk tells Huji that the leader of Hades has returned and challenges him to a fight. Not long after, the monk finally breathed his last. Moments later, when Huji and the monks were carrying out the funeral procession for the head monk, Huji received news that Qingquang had been kidnapped by the Hades sect. Meanwhile at the Hades temple, Qingquang and the other boys looked frightened and cried because they had been forcibly taken from their home. Qingquang tried to run away but was caught by Daisuke, who immediately molested the little boy. Qingquang and the others were then marked with numbers on their arms like their predecessors and would later be brainwashed so that they could easily accept the principles that the Hades sect taught. On the other hand, Huji had arrived at a deserted island and rushed to the Temple of Hades while carrying a wooden coffin on his back. At the same time, it seemed that everyone was waiting for the battle between Huang and Tetsumaku, one of Hades' fighters who was known to be very tough. But in the middle of the fight, one of Daisuke's men reported that Huji had arrived at Hades' temple. Daisuke immediately welcomed Huji, as well as Iko, who seemed happy with the arrival of him because she had secretly liked Huji since the first. Huji then asked Daisuke to free King Kwang and the other children, but Daisuke refuses and tells him to finish it with Hades' rules, which is to fight to the death against Hades' fighters. Daisuke then asked Huji to fight against Tetsumaku and Crazy Monkey. If he could defeat the two of them, then he would fight Daisuke, and if he won, then King Kwang and the other children would be released. Huji accepted Daisuke's challenge. Huji came to the battle arena just as Hwang was cornered by losing Tetsumaku's attack. When he saw Huji, Hwang muttered King of Vajra and Bill and several Hades fighters who already knew about Huji's prowess, so that he was nicknamed the King of Vajra in battle. However, Tetsumaku then killed Hwang in front of everyone. Huji then carried Hwang's body and handed it over to Bill for a proper burial. After that, Huji fought against Tetsumaku. Tetsumaku might look great when he fought Hwang. However, the burly man was overwhelmed by the barrage of attacks launched by Huji. He was dropped several times by Huji, who asked him to repent immediately, but he kept getting up and would not admit defeat to anyone, including Huji, the Vajra king. Until one time, Tetsumaku killed one of the prisoners, which infuriated Huji. He immediately launched a fatal attack at Tetsumaku, and in a matter of seconds, the mighty Tetsumaku was killed. Bill and the others cheered for Huji's victory. Huji then took Hwang's body to the mortuary for cleaning and proper burial. After that, he thanked the caretaker of the corpse. While in his room, Huji is approached by Iko, who scolds him for killing Tetsumaku. Huji said that he had to kill him to save his brother, but Iko said that the children would be safer in the Hades temple. Hearing this, Huji then said that Iko did not understand the real Hades sect, which was very contrary to what she had believed so far. The next day, Huji met Daisuke and expressed his readiness to fight Crazy Monkey. At the same time, several Hades fighters challenged Huji to a fight to avenge the death of Tetsumaku. Huji accepted their challenge and fought there. However, it wasn't long before they fought. Daisuke, who seemed surprised to know that now Hades fighters were using weapons instead of fighting with their hands, then stopped the fight. He said that weapons were forbidden in death fights because weapons were easily destroyed, like when Daisuke could easily break a katana. Daisuke then announces that he will give severe punishment if any of Hades' fighters dare to use weapons again in a death fight. On the other hand, Daisuke's men spread lies about Tetsumaku having defeated the Vajra king. Knowing this, Iko immediately confronted Daisuke and demanded an explanation, but Daisuke even scolded Iko back by saying that she works for the Hades sect and it is appropriate to support the rise of the Hades sect at all costs. Daisuke said that he was very confident that Huji would be defeated by Crazy Monkey because he had already devised a plan so that Crazy Monkey could win the battle against Huji. After that, Iko can write news about Huji's defeat in the fight against Crazy Monkey. While at the Temple of Hades, Huji was reminded of the past when he and his brother wandered around the temple and found a secret path to the main hall of the temple. Huji went back through the secret path and finally arrived at the temple's main hall, where he saw King Kwang and the other kids being forced to perform a ritual to worship the god Hades, known as the god of death. As dawn approaches, Daisuke and the Hades warriors are in the procession of Tetsumaku's funeral. In the distance, Huji also attended the funeral and prayed for Tetsumaku. Not long after that, Iko was seen approaching Huji and they were involved in a conversation about how to respond to the truth properly so as not to fall into things that would bring misery to themselves and others. After that, Daisuke's henchmen forced 3 prisoners, including Bill's subordinate named Arnold, to a place to fight Crazy Monkey. In pitch darkness, Arnold and the other prisoners, who could not predict Crazy Monkey's movements and the direction of his attack, finally died. Elsewhere, Huji met Daisuke, who said that he was pretentious, even though he was the one who decided to fight his brother until his brother died. Huji did not deny the truth, and all this time he bears such deep regret for it. Daisuke says that he has been waiting this long to repay Huji for hurting his face, and Huji replies that he will accept Daisuke's challenge to fight him. While the prisoners were eating, they were surprised by the appearance of the mortician who dragged Arnold's body. Seeing this, one of Arnold's colleagues, named Bauer, immediately ran to see the body of his friend, and a commotion immediately ensued there when Bill and his men were inflamed by Arnold's death. Bauer is then stabbed by one of Hades' fighters. Not long after, Huji came and immediately kicked the person who had stabbed Bauer. While dying, Bauer asked Huji to end his suffering. With great compulsion, Huji granted Bauer's request while screaming bitterly. After that, he asked what happened to Arnold. One of Daisuke's henchmen said that Arnold had been made an offering to Crazy Monkey. After that incident, the mortician then dragged Bauer's body while sprinkling gunpowder in the arena where Huji fought Crazy Monkey later that night. That night, Huji prepares to fight Crazy Monkey and all lights are turned off because Crazy Monkey's weakness is the beam of light that illuminates his vision. In pitch darkness, Huji fought against Crazy Monkey, where he seemed a little overwhelmed because he had difficulty adapting to dark conditions. On the other hand, Iko secretly uses a flash and takes pictures of Huji and Crazy Monkey's fight. However, Daisuke immediately scolded her for disturbing Crazy Monkey's concentration. As the battle between Huji and Crazy Monkey grew fiercer and Huji became increasingly desperate, the Mortician emerged from the water and secretly ignited gunpowder to create flames that lit up the battle arena. Suddenly Crazy Monkey lost his focus and Huji did not waste the opportunity to counterattack repeatedly until finally he was able to defeat Crazy Monkey. A few days later, Prince Shirogane comes to Amano in prison and is furious to learn that the formidable warriors of Hades have been defeated by Huji, which is in stark contrast to his goal of resurrecting the Hades sect. On the other hand, Amano received a letter from his daughter saying that she had learned the truth about the Hades sect, which was very different from what he had told her. Iko revealed that she intends to reveal the truth and preach about the defeat of the Hades fighters so that people out there know the real facts and are not fooled by the false propaganda the prince launched to instill fear. Amano then wrote a letter to the High Priestess and sent a large number of katanas to arm the warriors of Hades. He plans to kill all the prisoners during Daisuke's fight against Huji. Unbeknownst to the High Priest, Huji already knew of the plan because he had been spying on them from their hiding place. Meanwhile, Bill and the others were hanged from the temple ceiling because they were thought to have caused a lot of unrest. Seeing this, Huji then drew up a plan and wrote it down on a piece of paper. After that, he slipped the paper into Arnold's body to get the Mortician to support his plan because he already knew that the Mortician had helped him during the fight against Crazy Monkey by lighting a fire. After that, he came to Daisuke and asked to stop the hanging of Bill and the others. Daisuke is willing to grant Huji's request as long as Bill and Kunchai fight against Huji to the death. Bill's men suddenly felt angry at the decision, but Bill and Kunchai bravely accepted the decision and were willing to fight against Huji to save the children. Huji's fight against Bill and Kunchai didn't last long because Huji didn't want to make his friends suffer. After the Mortician confirmed that Bill and Kunchai had died, their bodies were immediately taken away. Bill and Kunchai were then taken to a room by the Mortician. Then, with Huji's direction through the letter he wrote, the Mortician could resuscitate Bill and Kunchai, who were apparently not dead. After that, the Mortician tells Bill and Kunchai Huji's plan to free the prisoners and protect the children when Huji fights Daisuke. That evening, Huji visited King Kwan to calm him and promised to save him soon. On the other hand, the Mortician sneaks into the cells of Bill's men and gives Bill a letter. However, Hades fighters caught his actions, who then brought the Mortician to Daisuke. The Hades fighters tell Daisuke that the Mortician lit the fire during Huji's fight against Crazy Monkey. The High Priest then advised Daisuke to lock the prisoners in prison during Daisuke's fight to not cause a riot. Daisuke agreed. Elsewhere, Bill and Kunchai devise a plan to free the prisoners using a secret passage and the chain of keys the Mortician has prepared. The next day, the High Priestess orders all of Hades' fighters to kill anyone who poses a threat, including Huji, during the fight. After that, the High Priestess armed Hades' fighters with katanas. Knowing this, Iko then went to Huji and asked him to go with the children immediately, but Huji already knew of the High Priest's plans and would continue the fight against Daisuke because he had already made plans with Bill and Kunchai. On the other hand, Bill and Kunchai then carry out their plan to free the prisoners and fight the fighters of Hades. Meanwhile, Huji came to the battle arena, where Daisuke was waiting for him. At the edge of the arena, the Mortician was chained by Daisuke as a reminder to Huji and a punishment for the Mortician so that he could witness Huji's destruction because he had dared to help him. Daisuke has prepared a gift for Huji, namely the 17-second funeral, where the hourglass will flow when the lever is pulled before the second of his death. Then, it rained heavily as Daisuke and Huji started the fight. Elsewhere, prisoners managed to break into the main room to free the children. However, they have to face the warrior Hades who uses the katana, so fierce clashes are inevitable. Meanwhile, a fierce duel ensues between Huji and Daisuke. The fight between Bill and the prisoners against the warriors of Hades escalates while Iko and the others try to protect the children. Seeing this, the High Priest grabbed King Kwang and tried to kill the boy, but Iko rushed to save him, thus sacrificing herself. Bill immediately approached Iko, but her life could not be saved anymore. Before she died, Iko told Bill to protect the children. On the other hand, Huji almost lost his fight against Daisuke, who had gotten stronger since they met. When Huji was dropped by Daisuke, the Mortician shouted for him, then tore off his sleeve, revealing a K31 sign indicating that he was his brother. Knowing that his brother was still alive, Huji immediately got up and launched a fatal attack at Daisuke. He then activated the 17-second hourglass. Using his deadly move, the Wrath of Vajra, he finally overthrew Daisuke. At the same time, The battle inside the Temple of Hades finally burst out and saw the high priest who was killed by Bill. At the end of his life, Daisuke was very disappointed when he saw Hades fighters fighting with weapons, which was very contrary to the principles of the Hades sect that he had believed in. Before dying, he recognized Huji as the king of Vajra and then threw himself in. Seeing their leader dead, Hades fighters dropped their weapons and surrendered. Bill and the prisoners cheered for Huji's victory and called him the Vajra King. Huji and his companions then rescued the kidnapped children at the Temple of Hades and freed them. K-31 then reveals that after his fight against Huji, he was thrown into the sea by Amano's henchmen. Apparently he was not dead and was saved by the crew of a Chinese merchant ship. After that, he tried to find Huji and waited for years for him to return to the Temple of Hades and take their revenge on the Hades sect. The film ends when Huji, King Kwang and their brother, K-31, visit Iko's grave. From this film, we can learn that true strength is not obtained by hurting others who are weaker to become the strongest. True strength comes from a sincere heart to protect those who are weaker than us and create a sense of security for those around us.